Thanks for staying with us. The Sustainable Development Goal 5 has placed gender equality and women's empowerment at the heart of its efforts to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. Now, regrettably, while some indicators of gender equality are progressing, practices like female genital mutilation remains high. In this special report, Basita Ekbang examines the reasons behind female genital mutilation in Nigeria.
It is said that he who wears the shoe knows where it pinches. Who else could tell the story of female genital mutilation than the woman who has gone through the process? 45-year-old Christy had her genital part cut by her mother at the early years of her life. She has 3 daughters and out of ignorance also subjected her first daughter to the same practice just to fulfill cultural demands.
And the belief in my tradition then is that if a woman is not done, that she will be loosed. And they also believe that giving birth will be difficult. So it was done.
Christy is not alone. Lola here shares her own experience. There is a belief in some quarters that the practice of female genital mutilation is to reduce a woman's libido. But does this really work?
But we found out around. We've asked. We've done the research. We've asked people we've asked survivors. Survivors have been there to speak to people that no, that is no, it does not have any benefits.
Especially as it's been done in some of the remote areas, villages, it's a terrible practice. That we're actually hoping that government will develop proper policies towards a total, not just preventing it, but stopping it.
Although female genital mutilation has been in practice for more than 1,000 years, but there are reasons to think that it could end in a single generation. That is why the United Nations strives for its full eradication by 2030. In the spirit of Sustainable Development Goal 5, Basita Ekbang, NTA News.
Many thanks, Basi. And still on zero tolerance for female genital mutilation, we have in the studio the President of Women Against Violence and Exploitation, Mrs. Lola Ibrahim, to shed more light on this harmful practice. Thank you very much for joining us, Mrs. Ibrahim.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's begin this way. In December 1993, if we recall, the United Nations General Assembly included female genital mutilation in the Declaration of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Now, how has this in any way helped in changing the mindset of people regarding this practice?
That was a very bold step by the UN, acknowledging and recognizing that FGM infringes on the rights of the women and girls that are survivors of FGM. And then if we take a look at how far have we gone in advocating for an end to FGM, probably what we will say is it has emboldened and given a voice to survivors like me to come out and seek professional help and speak out against the practice and tell people who are still doing it that FGM has no health benefits on the woman. And what they say is if you cut a woman, she will not be promiscuous. It doesn't work that way. What we need to do is to tell girls and educate them about their rights and their sexuality and what they should do and not do. Not to cut girls and then assume that it will reduce promiscuity in girls.
All right, and I can only imagine the experience for you, just like people out there can only, it's better to imagine than experience, you agree with me. But we have domestic legislations in curbing this harmful practice. But how effective has it been, especially with the attendant consequences?
I come from a long lineage of survivors. My mother was caught, my grandmother was caught, and carrying out the tradition, my mom caught all 3 of her daughters too. And then when you look at the legislation, the VAP law and the anti-FGM law, what has it done to curb this practice or what has it done to reduce it? You would agree with me that it's more like a paper tiger. It's not really doing much. Because you still find out that in most parts of Nigeria, the practice is still very much going on, even among the educated elites. So what we need to do is to make sure we have somebody like a scapegoat, a circumciser or a parent who takes their child to be caught. Let the law be implemented and let everybody know that these laws are there for a purpose. It's not just you know, for law's sake that they are just there. No, we should implement them. We should have police that are ready to do their work. We should have pro bono lawyers. We should have counselors that are ready to offer psychosocial support, you know, in all areas. And it should be free, because for girls to be bold enough to come out and say, oh, I'm under threat, or I'm at risk of being caught, or a neighbor who knows that her neighbor or her friend will take her daughter to be caught, can boldly report the way we report rape cases now. You know, we should give the law the backing, the necessary backing, and we should implement those laws to the letter.
Well, it seems a hard nut to crack, Mrs. Ibrahim. But as President of Women Against Violence and Exploitation, what is your organization doing to create more awareness, especially in these communities where this practice is still being done?
Okay, what we do basically is to give survivors the necessary support that they need, because a lot of survivors are suffering in silence. A lot of them have trauma, they have psychological effects, they have health challenges. I know of a lady in Akure who has keloid growing on her vagina, and she cannot seek help because the mom does not want her to seek help yet. And then we know a lot of girls who willingly offer themselves to be caught, because in that part of the country, in the south, men will not marry an uncaught girl in the village. So what we are doing is we're working with grassroots community development organizations to make sure they carry this awareness to all corners of the country. And then we also seek collaboration with religious leaders, especially those with huge followership, and then market women. And we also, you know, in line with this year's theme, Unleashing Youth Power, we encourage youth to take ownership of this campaign.
All right.
Because, yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lola Ibrahim. I'm afraid that's the much we can take from it. Of course, the collective responsibility, and we must all join hands to say no to it. All right. Mrs. Lola Ibrahim is the president, Women Against Violence and Exploitation, and she's been talking about the female genital mutilation that must be stopped. Let's look at